Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
As you know, we invited you in part because you've had an interesting few days now. A reshuffle that people said was a return not to the new politics that you've often talked about, but the old politics, splits, sackings, resignations. And yet in an article yesterday, you as Labour leader said it had left the Labour Party stronger. How so?
Well, a reshuffle is never easy, that I gather, because I've read the diaries of many former leaders, and there's never a good time to do it. And according to every expert around Westminster, reshuffles are always a plan to take place in a few hours and end up taking a few days, and that I fully understand and appreciate. Yes, there have been some changes. We have a shadow cabinet that is strong. We have a team that is strong. We have party membership that's very strong.
But you said stronger, you've said. Stronger. In other words, for people who said this was a massive distraction, and these were people in your own shadow cabinet, Lord Faulkner said it, you said, no, we've made gains.
It's not just the shadow cabinet. There's a lot of people doing jobs in different positions as well. For example, Emma Lewell-Buck taking on the role of campaigning in the North. I think that's very important. We brought in people, Kay Osamor doing work on equalities, and so we've widened the shadow cabinet to represent the diversity of the country and diversity of the membership of the Parliamentary Labour Party. So I'm happy with it. We're moving on. We're doing a lot of campaigning work. We're getting ready for the spring campaign.
But it's stronger, and in your words in the article yesterday, more coherent, because you started to move people who don't agree with you. You moved the Shadow Defence Secretary, and you clearly wanted to move the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Why didn't you?
Well, Maria is now doing DCMS work, and there's huge work to be done there on BBC, on Leveson, on arts and cultural diversity.
But not on Trident, where she disagreed with you.
Well, she has a different view on Trident. Indeed, many people have lots of different views on Trident, and those issues will be debated. And there's nothing wrong in that debate. And the party has a policy, but I also have a mandate from the election that I received as leader, and that now has to be debated within the party. And indeed, it is being debated within the party. There's no shame in having debate. There's no shame in having different opinions.
I want to ask you about that. Before I do, why didn't you move Hilary Benn? We, as journalists, were briefed that you did want to move Hilary Benn, then you didn't.
Well, I'm not sure where the briefing came from, but Hilary Benn is the Shadow Foreign Secretary. Hilary Benn and I had some very long discussions last week about a number of things. Yes, I know his views on Trident, and yes, we did not agree on the issue of Syria. We agree on many issues surrounding human rights, and I thought he gave an absolutely brilliant performance in attacking the government over its relationship with Saudi Arabia and the appalling abuse of human rights in Saudi Arabia. We as a country have got to develop a human rights-based foreign policy.
But he persuaded you that you could work together. You didn't need to move him as you thought you needed to.
Well, he and I had a long chat, and it was a private chat. Can't we leave it at that?
Oh, well, let's move on then, on to Trident. Now, you say there should be a debate. You're a lifelong opponent of nuclear weapons. We know that. You've moved the Shadow Defence Secretary who disagreed with you. So what new steps do you now need to take to ensure that your party adopts your policy of unilateralism?
Well, there's going to be a review of the policy, and it's going to be done jointly by the National Executive and the Shadow Cabinet. So the Shadow Cabinet will obviously have a role in that, as will the National Executive, and any policy has to be comprehensive. It has to start from the basis that we are signed up to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, itself a creation of the 1960s Labour government of Harold Wilson, and that there also has to be a policy of what we do to ensure protection of skills and jobs and throughout British industry that are in some part reliant on the whole Trident nuclear programme. But if we want to live in a nuclear-free world, we have to recognise that we have to make a contribution to it. Renewing Trident, in my view, goes against the fundamental spirit of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which requires the 5 declared nuclear weapons states not to renew their weapons systems.
So will you give members of the Labour Party a vote on this policy as your part of achieving your aim, which is to change the policy for good? forward?
It's not up to me to decide how the voting is done within the party. That's for the national executive to do.
Well, I think as leader they might want to listen to your advice.
Obviously make a contribution to this. First of all, let's get the discussion out there, debate out there, so that party members, trade unions, affiliates, and all the many, many peace organisations, think tanks, and everybody else can put forward a point of view.
But you want members to have a vote?
I want members to have a big say in it, whether that comes as a vote of individual members or a vote at conference. That will be decided. I haven't made up my mind.
And do you want to change the way policy is made in the Labour Party so conference doesn't have a veto, that the shadow cabinet doesn't have a veto?
My whole election programme was based on the need for ordinary people to be able to participate much more in politics, so that leaders don't go away and write policy, that executive groups don't go off and decide what the policy is, that ordinary people do. There's brilliance in everybody who've got some ideas. That was the whole basis, and that's why I think our party membership has got so much bigger, because people are enthused by the idea they can participate. Tom Watson and I are looking at digital ways of involving people. We're looking at lots of ways. Modernise our politics, modernise our democracy, bring people in. Everybody's got ideas. Let's hear them.
Can I sum it up this way? You are a lifelong opponent of nuclear weapons. You got a huge mandate. You've said you would never use them or threaten to use them. It is inconceivable that in 2020 you would stand on the brink of becoming Prime Minister with the Labour Party with its current policy. Either the policy has to go, or Mr. Corbyn, you have to go.
I think you're creating a crisis that doesn't exist. In any event, the whole decision that you're putting is 4.5 years away. Let's instead have a serious, intelligent debate. What role do nuclear weapons play in the modern world? Couldn't Britain play a part in bringing about a nuclear-free world? Couldn't we instead look at the real causes of insecurity in the world, which are human rights abuses, our famine, our floods, our environmental disasters? Look at those issues that bring about real security.
That you have to convince, isn't it? Not me or the electors, first of all. Let me just ask you a last one and then we'll move on, I promise. There is a huge anti-Trident rally. It's being organised by Stop the War. You went to their dinner just a few weeks ago. Will you speak at it if they ask you, the rally in February?
I think it's organised by CND, actually.
And Stop the War.
I'm sure there'll be people be represented there. I haven't been invited as yet.
But you would go if they asked you?
I'm supportive of the rally.
You're supportive of the rally and no reason you shouldn't go?
We'll see what happens.
OK. Now, the reason I ask you this is, you know, the key aim of any Prime Minister, it's always said, any government, is to keep the country safe. You will have seen this opinion poll, recent opinion poll, that said fewer than 1 in 5 voters trusted you to keep them and their family safe. Now, another reason perhaps this happened is your views on terrorism. Now, you sacked a shadow minister this week who simply stood up in the Commons and rejected the view, and I quote, that terrorist acts are always a response to what we in the West do. Wasn't that a perfectly reasonable statement by Pat McFadden?
On the face of it, what Pat was saying is fully understandable. The Pat had written quite a lot of stuff and made quite a lot of comments which showed that he wasn't happy with either my leadership or the direction the party was taking under my leadership, and I discussed this with him.
Was it a distortion of your views, though?
Yes, it was actually the way it was presented, because I am absolutely not in favour of terrorism of any sort. It is absolutely appalling and disgraceful that civilian life should be taken by random acts of terrorism, as happened in Paris. And indeed, I was in Paris and went to the scenes of many of those places where tragically those young people died.
I think the charge raised, Mr. Corbyn, is not that you're in favour of terrorism. I don't think anybody thinks that. But the suggestion is that you tend to think the reason it happens is because of things that the British government or the American government does. Do you think that the French government was responsible in some way for the attacks on the streets of Paris?
Of course the French government were not responsible for the attacks on the streets of Paris any more than any other government was from the West. But I would just say, listen very carefully to the analysis that President Obama gave of the situation in the Middle East, when he said we've got to think long and hard about the longer term effects of both the war in Afghanistan and the war in Iraq, about what that does. We have a terrible situation in Syria. We have a terrible situation developing in Iraq, and now, and sadly, getting even worse in Afghanistan. Can we not think very long and hard about what our long-term policies and objectives have to be?
And do you think we would be kept safer if that military action stopped. There's one thing I want to ask
I
you
was,
specifically on that.
as you well know, opposed to the intervention in Iraq, not because I was any supporter of Saddam Hussein. I was not. Indeed, I was probably opposed to Saddam Hussein long before all those people that supported the war decided they were opposed to him. What I wanted to do was bring about a peaceful transition in Iraq. We didn't. We atomized the whole state. We destroyed all the state structures, and we're still paying the price for that. And, of course, it looks like many of the generals and the leading military strategists in ISIL are actually former officers in Saddam's army who were driven out of the army by the American and British occupation.
A specific
of Iraq.
question about how you might carry out your responsibilities to keep the country safe. If you were told, as Prime Minister, that a drone strike could kill the Islamic State militant we saw in that latest video threatening Britain and indeed shooting 5 people in the head, would you agree to it?
I think it's a hypothetical question. You have to look at the sources of the support of ISIL. You have to look at the way it gets its money, the way it gets its weapons, the way it gets its arms, and look at the...
It is hypothetical. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'll ask you a specific question because you've always been anti-drones. Isn't the honest answer? No, I don't believe in drone strikes.
I'd want to see the evidence of it first, obviously, but the point I'm trying to make is that ISIL haven't come from nowhere. They've got a great deal of money from somewhere. They're selling oil to somebody else. They are very well financed and very well armed.
Services. I'm sorry, because I know you want to make a more broad point, but I think you have. If there was a specific piece of advice from the intelligence agencies, there he is, we can't capture him, it is legal. People want to know, would Jeremy Corbyn agree to it?
I would want to know what the evidence is, what difference it would make by doing that, what the chances were of capturing somebody. I suspect probably very, very low in those circumstances, so action could be taken.
Now, I know that you're keen to talk about other things as well, about the agenda. I want to give you a chance in 2 seconds, but there's one thing that's very current at the moment, of course, the doctors' strike, which is coming up in 24 hours' time. Will you be on a picket line? Are you in spirit on the picket line? Or do you agree with the Chief Medical Officer that it may harm patients?
I sent a message of support to the junior doctors some time ago. There is no doctors' strike in Wales. There's no doctors' strike in Scotland. They have reached sensible agreements with the junior doctors. We should recognise that junior doctors are qualified, extremely hard-working, deserve to be treated properly, and Jeremy Hunt should now come to an agreement with them. What's happening tomorrow is that elective surgery is being cancelled, but not emergency surgery. This is the first round of it. I hope that Jeremy Hunt realises the need to come to an agreement very quickly. These junior doctors work very hard. These junior doctors are needed for the NHS. How many are going to leave and go somewhere else because they get so fed up with the way they're being treated by this government?
Do you understand why people listening to you who like you, admire what you're trying to do, may just think we're never going to be able to move on as the Labour Party? Because if Jeremy wants to go to war with many people in his shadow cabinet, if he wants to change the policy on nuclear weapons, which split the party in the 80s, split it in the 60s as well, we will constantly be looking inwards.
I'm not going to war with anybody. What I'm trying to do is represent a very broad swathe of ordinary people's opinion around Britain who felt very put off by the politics of the past, but very put off by the similarity of economic strategies of the major parties. What I'm promoting and putting forward is a different approach to the economy of this country, so we grow our way out of problems and grow our way into prosperity rather than cut our way. At the moment, the cuts that are taking place, particularly in local government expenditure, are having a devastating effect on many communities. We did defeat the government on working tax credits when they tried to cut those. We did defeat the government on police cuts. We did defeat the government on human rights issues in Saudi Arabia. This is a party that is very determined and very strong, and don't underestimate the huge activity of the hundreds of thousands of people that have joined the Labour Party and are active in communities who feel very put off by the way politics has been done in the past.
I think the question people ask themselves who are not already hostile to you is this.
Are
Jeremy
people hostile
Corbyn,
to me?
Oh, I think there are one or two.
Can't believe it.
Can Jeremy Corbyn persuade people who are not natural Labour voters? And I think the reason they ask this question is this. I've known you for a long time. You're my Member of Parliament. I associate you with being a protester, a rebel. You're a man who goes on marches, you go to protest meetings, you go to rallies, and for decades, not years, you pretty much talk to people who already agree with you. Aren't people entitled to say he cannot even persuade senior members of the Labour Party to agree with him? How on earth is he going to persuade the country? to back him?
Well, somewhere along the line, I've managed to be re-elected 8 times in my constituency with very large majorities, and I started off with a very small majority, and I managed to receive the support of 250,000 members and supporters of the party in the leadership election. I realise that's not the public, but I just say this. If we carry on like this in this country, we end up with a more divided Britain. We end up with more people street sleeping and homeless. We end up with more young people, overcrowded accommodation, underachieving in school. We have a housing strategy that denies opportunity for everybody. Middle-class families whose children can't leave because they can't afford to buy anywhere. Poorer families can't get any council housing, forced into very expensive private rented accommodation. We can, will, and must do things very differently, and I am very determined that that alternative will be there for everybody in this country.
Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour Party, my Member of Parliament, thank you very much indeed.